Model Railroad Talk fans, today on this episode, we are going to be talking about and showing you how we do modelbuilding.org buildings. Yes, paper buildings. We'll show you that. And we're going to give you an update on the Iowa Eastern Railroad. It's a short update, but we've hit a, milestone. So stick around because we're going to get the show on the tracks. Welcome back to another video here on Model Railroad Talk. I want to start out by saying to all the new subscribers we've got, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited. It gives me that boost of energy to start producing more videos, along with ideas for the audio podcast. So thank you. So as we said in this, in the intro, I'm going to be talking about paper buildings, and more specifically, modelbuilding.org buildings. I know there are several companies out there that do the paper printed buildings. Modelbuilding.org are the ones that I have the experience with. I have purchased several of their what we'll call kits. And when I say kit or groups, whatever you want to call it, it's where you can get anywhere from a lot of times 4 to 6 buildings all the way up to 8 or 10 buildings, depending on what group it is and what buildings are in there. As you can see back here, this and part of this and what I showed you in the intro or the very beginning, those are modelbuilding.org buildings. And you can see back here, right here, the same there. This one is, I've got several, they do make 3D, what they call 3D buildings. Granted, they don't have the detail like a regular building. Some people are naysayers against the paper building setup. However, once I started doing research on them, I really started liking what they were about. They're good for background buildings. You can add a little more dimension to them by, printing off a second set of the plans and cutting out the extra, like the trim or around a door and gluing that on top. And it kind of takes that 2D flat look into a little bit of 3D. But in this, we're going to start here shortly, but I'm going to show you just a few steps of how I get to the point where the building is actually on the cardboard. I use chipboard is what it's called. I buy it off Amazon. You can use, a lot of people will use like old cereal boxes. Printing straight on paper, you can, if it's a 3D building, you technically could if you put support in there, but it's only as good as the paper that's printed on. So we'll show you everything. Let's get started and doing a modelbuildings.org building. All right. You'll have to forgive me, my actual workspace. As you can see back here, I've got my workbench. It tucks under the layout. I am limited on my workspace. So I don't have a lot because I have the railroad in my space that has been allotted to me for this. So we'll start from here. But what I'm using, and I can't tell you how thick it is, but it's just chipboard. I bought a ream of it off of Amazon. Fairly inexpensive. I looked up chipboard. You can use, what do they call it? Not construction paper, but they have like a thicker paper. But I prefer this because it gives the buildings a little more structural integrity. And in the end, whether it's, if you're doing a temporary thing, okay, you can just put them together with the paper. But for me, I intend on using them for background buildings. And actually, if you look right back here, this is my Ogundape grain. That is actually and you see it in our intro, that is actually a modelbuildings.org building. The only difference is I for the silos, I had some tubes, and I've talked about it before. I had some tubes from work that I printed off the silo paper and just put them around it. As you can see, it's big. I added a few extra details, which I'm going to as time goes on, but I'm waiting on my finer details until it's ready to be set in place and not moved unless it absolutely has to be. But so that's what I use, okay? I generally try to use the whitest paper you can get. For the brightness, most papers are 90 or 92 brightness. I prefer like a 96 roughly brightness, and I'm actually using a little bit heavier paper as well, not your standard copy paper, although you can use a standard copy paper. I just prefer the little bit brighter and a little bit heavier paper. I found, for me anyways, when I glue these on there and I let them cure, I found that with the heavier paper, it helps, because there are some of these where you actually have to bend tabs to fold it around so you have the side pieces in a sense, and the heavier paper seems to hold up a little better. What the building we're doing today is not the same as this, but I have to get some of these ready because I'm making a long building out of this for one part on the railroad. So we're going to go through and show you that. What I am using for the adhesive, it's 3M Super 77 multi-purpose adhesive. This is basically a permanent adhesive. So for forewarning, make sure you spray in a well-ventilated area. And or if you don't have a ventilated area, make sure you're wearing a mask. For the purposes of this video, for you to be able to hear me, I'm not wearing a mask. And generally I do have a mask here that I do when I do lots of this. And then I also have a fan that I set up that vents to the outside, but because of the background noise it makes, I'm not using it right now. But we're only going to do 2 of these pages. So we'll be fine. So let's get started. So make sure your Super 77, which this stuff is awesome. I've tried some other stuff. I think it was Loctite, and I don't remember the other brand. The Loctite was repositionable, or supposedly was repositionable, but it wasn't, not with what we're doing. But I didn't like that because after a while, if, like, let's say you get a whole bunch of these ready, and I generally let them set at least 3 to 4 hours before I go and start cutting them, to make sure the paper doesn't tear when you cut. And you'll see kind of what I'm talking about when we get to the actual building here. But I found this is the best stuff. And there's tons of model railroad videos out there. I know, if you know Jerry Leone, he uses this stuff. A lot of model railroaders use this 3M Super 77. You can get it at any hardware store, Amazon, whatever. So what I like to do for purposes of making sure it sticks is I like to spray both my hardboard and the back of the paper. So what I do is, and I'm doing this over one of my trash cans, and it's actually perfect that it's full because I got to change my trash out this weekend. But it's perfect because I can set these down and spray them and not have to hold them as much. So what I like to do is just give the chipboard, cardboard, whatever you want to call it, just a light spray, as you can see in the video. I give it just enough of a spray. If you're using this chipboard, or even like the back of a cereal box, or using a cereal box and you're using the inside of it where it looks like that, I give it just enough that while I'm spraying it, the color changes, and then I stop because it will set up itself. The next thing I do is I take the paper, and I like wearing gloves. Some people, if you modelbuildings.org, they will say cut it out and put it on there. I'm not saying that's bad. That for me, I would rather put it on there and cut away the pieces I don't need, that kind of thing. So here we go. So now be very careful you don't get adhesive on the front, because remember, this is ink. Unless you're using a laser jet printer, which I'm not, this is inkjet. This getting on there will, on the actual ink side, can mess that up. So that's where I'm wearing the glove. But like I did with that, I give this a light coat And yes, my layout is a workbench for me. And I set those aside, and we'll give those just a couple minutes to not really set up, but give them a little bit to tack and bite into each side. All right, now that we've given it a little bit, and I'm talking maybe a minute, maybe two at most, I've got a nice flat spot. And yes, it's my layout. Like I said, I have to use someday. I'm going to have to figure something else out once this gets all scenic. I get that. So yeah, remember we have our light spray of Super 77 on the cardboard. We have our light spray on the back of the building that we're putting. So what I like to do then is just simply put it on here, and it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as your areas here, and I'll show you in a minute, as long as your areas that your building is actually going to be is covered, you could be off a little bit, the way I do it anyways, and it really won't make a difference. So there again, as you saw, I just lined it up, and I apologize while I'm doing this if my mic's making little noises. Now that I did that, I like to go both ways. I've got little rollers that have like a rubber wheel on it. I do use those sometimes if I'm doing a whole bunch at once, because my fingers start getting a little, tired from doing that. But as you can see, that's how I get them prepped. So we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, now that we have established our building, we've got it printed on. Now, when you print these off, I will say, like the picture I showed you of this building we're doing, it prints that off, and it prints off like assembly instructions. I don't put those on the back. I go through the printout, especially if it's a new building that I haven't done yet, and I print it off. And actually, I have a book that I've printed them all off, so I can go through and kind of, I'll use this one here, whatever. I go through and realize, okay, what pieces am I going to use? Am I going to use a canopy? Am I going to use the roof, kind of thing? So, and then those are the ones that I actually attach to the cardboard. Yes, my workbench is messy. I think most model railroaders, I'm not all, I get there's some out there that keep it really clean. I've been working on locomotive, putting track in, building rail car that I haven't finished yet, that I need to. But it is what it is, and we are going to get working on this. And the things you will need are a straight edge. This happens to be a Micro Lux model railroad ruler. I like it. I use it a lot when I'm doing this stuff. It's nice and firm, and it doesn't bend a lot. You don't have to use one of these. I would just make sure whatever your straight edge is a metal one, because you will be cutting. If you use a plastic one, you take the chance of cutting into it, and then you don't have straight edges. The other thing is an X-Acto knife. Make sure you have a brand new blade in there, or a hobby knife, whatever, a brand new blade, because cutting through this stuff, generally speaking, like this one, I should be able to use one blade on, but like the building that I showed you that I'm putting multiples, something like that, I'm probably going to be going through, because I believe that one's going to be that one's going to be actually like 6 or 8 pages of the building itself. I'm probably going to go through 4 or 5 blades on that. So make sure you have plenty of hobby blades, sharp ones and new, because you will be going through it. So the next thing, one last tool. You may need these. If you need them for any other modeling, you're going to need them for this. It's what's part of getting old, right? All right. These buildings, they have established, if you look, if you can see it, hopefully here, you have your main building, right? Okay. Then you have little side tabs where they're dashed lines. You see that all the way around. This one is the canopy. Okay. And then you have dashed lines. So these are actually flanges. that the roof will actually attach to. Okay, we'll glue the roof to that once we get that cut out. But as an example, right here and at the bottom, we don't cut all the way through there. What those are for is we'll line the ruler up on it and lightly score it. Those are bend spots. I prefer to, what I do, some people will actually bend at those spots and not score it. They'll just bend it, and then they'll actually, some people actually cut this out and then set it on, then glue it to this, and then go back and glue pieces in. For me, I'm eventually, if this building turns out good, I'm eventually going to add some, I got some wood back here, trim and stuff like that. But for now, this is what we're going to go with. So it's real simple. You follow the instructions. I generally like to do all my angle cutting and stuff like that. So for instance, the flanges for the sides and stuff. Now, one last thing I'll show you as an example on this one. It's got this piece right here and this piece right here. Those are actually there, so if you want to attach it to a backdrop or something like that. I don't want mine attached, but I'm going to cut those off because I don't need it. The other ones we will cut around. So I generally start by, cutting. I determine if I do determine what I'm going to cut off, I cut them off first thing, so that way I don't have to worry about them later. And then when I'm doing these, I'm using just regular cutting mat, but I make several cuts. I don't try to cut it in one. I have found, I'm using just the standard number 11 blades. I have found with these, if you try to make too deep of a cut too fast with the chipboard and the paper, you will break the fine tip, which will probably end up breaking anyways, but you'll end up breaking it, and then you potentially aren't going to have as sharp of a cut. So next thing I do is I start working on cutting out some of my angles. And I recommend, as an example here, you can see right here, I've already cut this edge, remember, because we're not attaching. And then this is for the roof to attach, so I do that. One thing I almost forgot before I actually start cutting things, and I just thought about that, is wherever there's going to be a bend like that, you want to go in and lightly score. Now, I can't tell you how many draws, because a lot of it depends on draws with the knife, very light draws. It depends on how thick of how thick of paper you're using, but also more importantly, how thick of chipboard you're using. And so I do that. And then remember the marks, I'll show you here in a second. We have the marks for the sides that bend around. We just do a couple light draws on that. And this one that I'm building is an actual background building. It is not a 3D building. I'm really planning on any of my forward 3D buildings. I'm really planning on those being either wood craftsman kits or plastic kits, actual model railroad, not paper. But that's not to say I may not, that's to say I may not use one somewhere on the railroad if it looks good. So, all right. So I am just finishing up doing all my cuts. You guys have seen plenty of people and probably already know how to cut with a straight line and a hobby knife. So I spared you the boredom of watching me do that. All in all, this little kit only took me maybe 5 minutes to cut. But as you can see, I have the main building, the canopy, and, well, if it'll work with me here, the roof. Okay. I opted on this one because of where this is going to go. It's just a background building, so it did have a little dock I could put together. I decided not to because of where it's going to go. It's more or less right now a trial of where it's going to go, and if it works, I can always go back later and do that. The one thing that I have learned with these, and there again, it depends on what kind of paper you're using, but I found I get a better adhesion if you peel off just the top layer of paper where your tabs are. Reason being is, depending on what kind of paper and how the paper was manufactured and all that good stuff, it can actually hinder your whatever glue you're using from soaking in and getting a good bite. I've had buildings in the past that I have done that with, and I come back and okay, they're set up, they're working good right now. But then I come back and guess what? They are not being held together. So one thing I did forget to mention, you're going to want some clothespins or some clamps, some form of clamps. And also, while I said I use canopy glue for this, I did in the past, but I found this at my local craft store. It's Crafter's Pick by API or AP1s, APIs, Crafter's Pick Ultimate Glue. It works excellent. It works a lot of ways like the canopy glue does, and it's actually a tad thicker than canopy glue, so I like it in that aspect that since it's thicker, when you go to put it on for doing stuff like this, it doesn't soak in as quick or as much as, say, the canopy glue can, and it'll help save it. There's less chance of warping. Now, normally that's the reason right there. I was just gonna say, normally I do this on, I have a piece of old paper or board that's messed up, and but for purposes of this video, we're doing it right here, and I just take my finger and do that. Okay, something simple, right? So the first thing I do is you take the roof and you get it lined up. Now, this glue that I'm using, you want to make sure that you get it stuck. Like canopy glue, it dries pretty quick and it's good stuff. This stuff, being that it's not as, I guess, doesn't have quite as much moisture content as the canopy glue, it sets up a lot quicker. So I just basically glue that in like that, and I'll set my clamps in. If you just, like I did, which I would recommend doing one set of tabs at a time at first until you get the hang of it. But like me, I've done it enough. I've worked with this setup enough that I get it, or I understand it. I've got my technique down, and basically you just fold your tabs in, and I'll show you here in a second. You just fold your tabs in, glue it, and if you look, it's one tab's under this clothespin and one's under this one, and voila, you have a background building. What I like a lot about these buildings are they're so customizable that you can do almost anything you want with them. You can even use chalk. You know, if you want to weather them, use chalk to do that. And what I'm doing here is well, if I did that right, there we go. I'm actually putting the canopy on. So we're gonna put a little glue on here, and I just fitted it is all. And I fitted it off video, just to verify that I had it cut right. But same as we did before, I put some glue on there, and I realize I'm new at this video thing, so but simple enough. And instead, so in this case, instead of pushing that back flap through and taking our chance of getting it on the front, we're actually going to push the canopy part through the back, and we're going to push it down on the back, and then we bring it up front here. And once it dries, we can go in and do our oh, those aren't long enough. That's all right. This glue dries pretty quick. So as an example, I just put them on. Now I wouldn't go yanking on it, but once it sets up, there you have a building. In matter of, honestly, with even recording this, a matter of however long this video is, 15, 20 minutes, in less time, you can have one of these made. Now, more buildings, more like the Ogundape grain, yes, that was a lot more in depth of a building. They do have quite a few buildings that are in depth, like this one right back here is the original Ogundape grain, and I decided I wanted to go bigger. The background buildings you've seen up there, background buildings aren't too bad unless you're doing a big long one, like I showed you how I mount them to a piece of cardboard. Outside of that, they're easy. Most of them are, you can, once you let the paper, the Super 77 in a sense, cure on the back or between the paper and the chipboard, it's a matter of, the longest part is cutting everything out. Some have more angles and cuts which take a little more time. Some are easy like this one. So there you have it, our building on the layout. It is really narrow. If you can see, it's a narrow building, but it fits in there nicely. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily where that's going to go, but with where I'm at in the building process, I'm using these just to see, okay, am I going to want what kind for background? You know, am I going to want all buildings along here? Or am I going to want like distant fields because it's the Midwest or whatever? So, but as you can see, those are actually really easy to do. There's so much you can customize with it. You can go in with, like I was saying before, chalks, colored pencils. Markers I would stay away from because markers tend to soak and bleed. But colored pencils, if you want to add, maybe you have one of these doors you want to paint a different color or have it be a different color, you can go in and you know, do your own customizing, or you can do it in Photoshop. And as promised, the layout is officially done with track. You can see I've got the track finally all laid for the industry that's going back here, my 5-track yard. I've got all the turnouts in, and you can see the Fast Tracks turnouts, the custom 3 curve turnout that I had Randy D do for me. I'm excited, very excited. That's a huge step for me. I still have to go back and throw in my feeder wires and put in turnout or switch machines, stuff like that. But the track is there. I've got cars in there. I need to, more or less, the next step is I need to start bringing cars up from the lower yard because I only have a few left up top here, and start filling it in so I can really get a good gauge of how many cars can fit and stuff. But that's down the road, because at this point I'm super excited because that's done. Now I can take my time going and doing what I need to do, because it's going to be a little bit before I can get all the tortoise switch machines I need to operate the turnouts. I'm kind of focusing, moving my building over to, or modeling over to, I'm starting to go towards my structures. Coming up, and some videos down the road, I'm going to be working on, now that I know where my Casey's building is, which is back right around over there. You may have seen it in some of the shots earlier in this video in the background. I know where it's going to go. I just got to figure out exactly where it's going to go, and I know it's going to have a road. Once I get that figured out and it drawn, I can actually do the concrete on there and do the entrance and exit approaches and all that stuff. and start getting that done. I've got other buildings that I need to get built so I can start putting them in different places and start figuring out my industries. So, but I wanted to show you this because these background buildings, whether you're planning on using them permanent on your railroad or even just temporary, for the little bit of cost it is for, you know, like I said, you can get a pack of 4 to 6 buildings for anywhere from $25 to $35, depending on what it is. And even buying one of those, that little bit, you have options. You can change the color, change them up, change the siding, whatever you want to do in your photo editing software, and print them off. And it's not a one-time print. It's a lifetime unlimited printing of them. So that's what's nice about those. It's great to have those options. And like I said, I'm in the planning stages now of figuring out where industries are going to go. And in my backdrop, I'm starting to think about photo backdrops to give that illusion of depth and stuff. I'm really starting to think about that now. So that's where these come into play, as I need to figure out where I want all background buildings, because where those aren't going to be, I need, like in a sense, photo backdrops. So I want to thank you for listening. Appreciate all the like and subscribes. And if this is your first video, please like and subscribe. Check us out, our audio podcast. It's on all the major platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, all that stuff. We do have a special guest coming in on episode 83, which will be released 1 week from, or basically from when this is recorded, 1 week from tomorrow, which is Saturday. And that's going to be released really soon. And we're going to have another special guest on. So things are picking up on the audio podcast side. So I want to thank everybody for that. Remember, you can check us out, modelrailroadtalk.com. We're on Facebook. Look us up, Model Railroad Talk. If you're over there on Facebook, give us a like. We're on TikTok. Give us a follow, I think is on there. But like I said, if you like this, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're focusing more on that now with now that I've got some writer block or whatever you want to call it out of the way. And I'm super excited because I'm finally past the point. I know what I need to do now. I've gotten pretty much everything figured out where it's going to be. So thanks for watching. And as I always say, keep your train on the tracks.